Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View.
Good Sunday morning to you. Welcome to Capitol View. I'm Jay Bir. He's still fresh off retaining his office. Representative French Hill took some time to catch up with us last week and update us on what Congress could be proposing with a new COVID relief bill.
All right, French, let's just kind of jump into things here. Obviously, the big thing on everybody's mind right now is the next COVID relief bill. When can we expect that? Can we expect that, I guess? And then also, too, what are some of the big things that are going to be involved with the next round, if there is one?
Well, Jay, it's good to be with you. And this week, I think, has been a good news, bad news week for COVID-19 relief. The bad news is that Speaker Pelosi really hasn't changed her view, and she's actually moving a bill this week on marijuana legalization and prohibition of owning big cats instead of working on COVID-19 relief. But the good news is that a group of 50 members in the House have collaborated with a group of bipartisan members in the Senate, and they have proposed a compromise COVID-19 relief bill that's about $900 billion. It extends the unemployment compensation issue and gives some certainty there. It gives our governors flexibility in spending the CARES Act money until September of 2021. This is very important for Governor Hutchinson. It adds money for broadband, adds money for vaccine support and distribution, tracing and testing, a little bit more money for our educational institutions to support their efforts. And very importantly, for our restaurants and our hotels, it extends the Paycheck Protection Program, increases the amount of money, makes the forgiveness easier, and you can have a second loan. You can double dip, if you will, on the Paycheck Protection Program. And it also adds something I think will be very helpful for venues, music venues, theaters that have been really hard hit this year. They have a special grant program for them.
And you mentioned there the CARES Act money going until September. Is that the current, I guess for Arkansas in this case, the current $1.2 billion, or does that actually add anything into that pot?
There is some additional money added to the state and local pot, but the important thing is that flexibility on spending it. So Governor Hutchinson will probably get some more money in education and for general purposes, but the important thing is that his existing CARES Act money, he can now have till September 2021 to spend it. And as you know, he has set aside a significant amount of money, $50 million, I think, for broadband investment. I don't want to say it's impossible to spend that money before 12/31 of 2020, but this gives the governor a lot more flexibility.
Never doubt a governor's ability to be able to spend $50 million, that's for sure. You kind of touched on a little bit the vaccine. From a national standpoint, and then I guess breaking it down here to Arkansas as well, what are we looking at in terms of distribution? What's that going to look like? Obviously, it depends on which vaccine we start rolling out as to how much and some of that sort of rigmarole there. But what are we looking at in terms of how much is going to go to where? Because, all 50 states obviously need some of this in some form or fashion. And you don't want this to turn into, like we saw with the PPE deal, into bidding wars when it comes to the states.
Yeah, boy, that's a very good question. Very perceptive point of view about what we went through in the spring on trying to prep for PPE, personal protective equipment. So here, the federal government with the Defense Logistics Agency, plus those pharmaceutical companies, have worked with the Departments of Health in all 50 states and the territories on a distribution plan for both those essential workers, those older Americans who are the most vulnerable, and then how to distribute it retail, if you want to think about it that way, through pharmacies and through medical facilities. That's all been outlined. I suspect we'll get the initial doses in Arkansas, maybe 20,000 or so in December, this month. And then we'll get more as it ramps up early in 2021. Second big issue is it's going to be more than one vaccine choice. For example, the Pfizer vaccine's gotten a lot of publicity, but it has to be stored at an extremely low temperature. I mean, 80 below zero or 90 below zero, and it's a 2-dose vaccine. So that creates a logistic issue about storage. But we're going to have the Moderna vaccine and several others, I think, complete their clinical trials and safety testing with the FDA. So Americans are going to have multiple choices in vaccines over the next few weeks.
Now, I know there was a little bit of a hiccup with the Moderna one as well. Are we still seeing that timeline for them still being early next year, or because of some of their data entry and things that they kind of noticed in themselves? Does that kind of push them back? Because I know that's the more inexpensive one. I know some of the smaller countries out there, less developed, are really dependent on that one here, at least in the early stages.
Right, and I do think they're on track. They're continuing to review their data, expand their human trials, and they'll do that to the FDA's satisfaction. You may noted that the Pfizer vaccine was approved by the UK authorities this week, so that's a good step forward. But there are even people working on a capsule, a pill version of a vaccine that are still much earlier stage in their work. But I think this is the world's pharmaceutical innovation at the best. So Operation Warp Speed, kicked off by the Trump administration in February and funded by Congress through the CARES Act, I think is going to produce good results for not only the United States, but for families all around the world.
And we'll kind of get you something off of COVID and all that here, but you had been working on this pretty diligently, this Scipio Jones legislation. Just for some of our viewers, just kind of recap what that was. And I know that was actually signed into law this past week, so you got to be pretty excited about that.
Well, Scipio Jones is one of the great legal scholars and heroes in the history of Arkansas and one of the great legal minds in our country. Born into slavery, he rose to prominence in the early 20th century. And last year, we commemorated the horrible tragedy of the Elaine Massacre of 1919, where it ended up being a terrible, brutal lynching and murders of Black Americans in the Mississippi Delta. Well, 12 black sharecroppers were accused of initiating that riot, race riot, and they were found guilty and convicted of a capital crime. And it was Scipio Jones who got them off that sentence and set the precedent that the federal courts could look at state court decisions, which led the way to a lot more civil rights victories in the future. So we're going to hang a portrait to Scipio Jones at the post office on Main Street in Little Rock, and that post office is named for Scipio Africanus Jones. So to me, it's a great way to commemorate his memory in our state. And I want to thank Brian Mitchell, professor over at UA Little Rock, and John Gill, noted lawyer and historian in Little Rock, for offering this good idea for our community.
And we certainly do appreciate Congressman Hill's time.